we reject 70% of what comes through the door. We don't want to be like that. What we want to be like is, if we don't think we can maximize value for you, if we don't think we can present your property in the best light, which will ensure a fast sale to the right buyer at a good price, we will either not work with you because we're not the right fit, or we can offer you loads of services to get you from not really being ready to market to being ready for market.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Complete Agent Podcast, where each week we get together to talk all things estate agency. My name is Dave Warburton. As always, I'm joined by my colleagues in the industry, Ian Storey and James Kendall. But this week, delighted to say we have a very special guest, Ellie Rees from Brickworks in London. Say hello.
Hello.
Great to have you. And we're going to be deep diving into your career and how you're seeing the market at the moment, etc. So it's going to be nice to have another viewpoint for a change. And Ellie is self-confessed talker. She talks too much, apparently. She just told us before she comes on. So Ian and I are going to nip off shortly and leave JK and Ellie to it. Hopefully we might get a word in. No, I'm only joking, guys. I'm only joking. Anyway, let's start with the usual tradition. How's your week been? Let's go to you on the basis of what I've just said. Ian Storey.
Thanks. Good morning and hello, Ellie. So, good week, really. We've had a good little run on gold dust sales this week since the podcast. So we've agreed four, maybe five, between 500 and a million, all on 2%. So good sales, love that bit of the market, as you know. Equally, above a million, we've got pretty regular viewings across everything. One at 1.3 that I'm hoping we're going to tie up this week. We did a couple of really good price reductions, a really big price reduction on one of the higher end ones, which has generated 2 viewings straight away. So that's good. And then on listings, a good range of listings as well, from sort of 1.5 down to 550, 600, about 4 or 5 giving us a go ahead. So pretty standard week, really, but all good. No fall throughs. Our 2 biggest ones are nearing exchange. So we've got one at 4.3 mil and one at 2.6. They're our 2 biggest ones currently, and they're both nudging on exchange of contracts. So that will be a good day when they happen. Really, really busy across valuations. So currently we're booking our next marketing shoots and valuations in for the end of July. That's our next availability. And we're recruiting currently for a new valuer as well because of that. And I've got some good candidates to speak to already. So all good, really. Off to Mallorca week on Monday, which would be nice.
It's been a few days since you've been on holiday.
So the sun is calling. I'll be thinking about you two all the time when I'm there. Dave?
Yeah, not too bad. I'm still on a high from our mastermind earlier in the week, which was a brilliant event, a really good turnout, and I think everybody got loads of value. It was also nice to hear some of the success stories in the room, lads. I think that one thing that you tend to find in a estate agency, we consistently talk about the same things. I think lots of people have the same challenges around the country, and it's nice to all get in a room and discuss that, isn't it? And hear the successes. But from a personal point of view, still suffering the same challenges with regards to some dodgy chains. There's a lot of pressure, I think, at the moment from certain vendors and buyers. So things are taking a bit longer than I would have hoped. But sales are pretty good. Took an offer on a nice one at 2% at 800,000 last night, and we're hoping to get that tied up. I've not got my stats in front of me, but I want to say that I've got a couple more offers kicking around as well on high-end stuff, which is nice. The big challenge for me is, which is a nice thing to have, I just don't have space to get people in for valuations. I'm booking valuations now, week beginning something like, is it 16th of July? I just don't have the space, so it's a nice problem to have. But obviously it's annoying as well, because you want to try and get everybody seen as quick as you possibly can. Got loads of take-ons booked in and things in photography. I've already done 2 really good ones this week. So yeah, we're going to be launching some really nice stuff. But overall, sales are good. A couple of exchanges are straggling, but my main challenge right now is chains, keeping things alive, and it's been like that for the last 2 or 3 weeks. So, yes, plenty of challenges, but all good. JK.
Yeah, I'll keep it really brief so we can get into it today. But we're down on vowels. We're still booking an average of 1 a day for every day this month, which is still okay. But last month was really good for that. Sales we're having a really good month for. We'd struggled last month on sales, but I mean we'd had an incredible Q1, and what was it? April was incredible as well. But just I don't know what it was about May. May just wasn't a good month for us, which is weird because everyone else seemed to have a great month. But June's been really good. Lots on the board. To be honest, if we do what we should do, what'll be the 26th today, if everything that's kind of being negotiated lines up, we could kind of almost have a really good May and a good June, if that makes sense. We could pick up the slack, and I think the reason for it was, I think I said to you guys on the pod before, was that we were really struggling to get homes to market, and I think that's really where we suffered in May, because a lot of the stock that we had, we couldn't bring to market. And we brought it to market and it sold quite quickly because we had some really good stuff in there. Some more good stuff coming on as well. After the pod today, I'm heading over to a beautifully refurbished cottage in the countryside. That's a 700. That should be fairly straightforward. Really, really nice.
You said you were going to keep it brief, JK.
This is brief for me.
Fabulous.
But yeah, other than that, all good pretty around. Again, still buzzing from Mastermind on Tuesday. But yeah, that's me. How's your week been, Ellie? Give us a rundown of your week.
Feels like a combination of everybody's, actually, weirdly. We didn't have a particularly, but when you say sales, do you mean completions?
Sales agreed.
Oh, agreed. Okay, I see what you mean. Oh no, May was probably quite good for us. Yeah. I just feel like we're just sort of we're just generally, it feels positive, but that could just be in comparison to last year, but we have launched quite a lot for us this week, and it feels to me like vendors are imagining that there's this window of opportunity before August, and I think that that's probably right. And they want to get in before September. So I think we had 6 launches yesterday, and I think we've got the same next week. Nice. We have just started to sojourn into the Kent coast, and we got somebody on the ground there. So as far up as Whitstable, and then all the way down Margate, Ramsgate, Broadstairs, and then all the way down to Deal. So we had a new build, which was a Victorian replica designed by an architect, built by an architect in Ramsgate, that went under offer straight away, that we had staged. So that was really fantastic because that was at just over asking. And that was a buyer from Brighton, and that was really good for us because we were just sort of trying to get our heads around who the profile of buyer might be. There's lots of London buyers in particularly Margate and Ramsgate. And then we launched a beautiful flat in Margate but quite a while ago, and it was so beautiful. It was featured in the Times. Photography was amazing. It was so exquisite, and we just couldn't get people in. And then suddenly 2 offers. So that's about to go under. So that's really good. It's small. It's a lower price point than we used to in the areas of London that we cover. But there's really fantastic stock, and there's really the right stock for us as a brand. We've just shot a 5-bedroom, 4-story townhouse on one of the big Victorian squares, Hawley Square there, which is stunning. It's quite mad. It's maximalist, crazy wallpaper and all that kind of stuff. Very rock and roll. That's launching in September. We're doing a lot of shoots while the weather's good now, getting ready for people in September. That is where we are busiest. But I find that really exciting because it makes me not worry. We've got a good pipeline. Rex just told me yesterday, that's my husband, who I don't really look at the numbers. I'm like, don't show me a spreadsheet. I don't understand them. I'm just back of a fag packet.
Yeah.
So I'm probably less involved in that side of things than you guys. But in general, it's really positive, and just as always, some beautiful stuff. Coming
that's
on.
The thing, I guess you're the creative side, aren't you? Really, like that's I am. To be honest, I'm more of a kind of creative-y kind of person, and I've had to kind of like force myself to get into the numbers, because when I see a spreadsheet, I'm like, no, you're a bit like that as well.
I know.
Yeah, I'm just like that. Yeah. I love.
Dave we call him Data Dave behind his back.
Yeah.
I wish it was. I found it easier, or I was more inclined to do it. And maybe I'm too lazy, but I really, after a decade running my own business, I really should understand how to read, a profit and loss sheet.
Yeah, there is that, but I also think, Ellie, I think there's a lot to be said for having good balance.
Yeah.
And I think if if you double down on what you're really, really good at, which clearly for you would be the creative and things like that, then it's not a bad place to be, because you can find people to do the other bits, and if you've got a good support network there, then I'm sure that you'll as long as somebody knows where you're up to, that's the main thing.
I am the main valuer as well. I mean, that is, if that's a creative role, I don't know if it necessarily is, but that is also my job. So I have to be aware of, obviously fees and how we present the company in that regard, because I am the person on the ground, so to speak. All the other thing that's happened is we've sort of stolen 2 properties from relatively big agents, which is always nice.
Yeah.
One from Savills in Primrose Hill, which is great, and one from Tatler's in Crouch End. Savills have a very large gender pay gap.
Do they?
Yeah. One of the biggest.
No, I'll use that on my.
Yeah, at one point.
We've got London buyers though.
Don't know what the most recent data is, so don't quote me. I'm about to say it on a podcast. But in something like 2022, it was like 40% or something.
Oh wow.
But that's because we're agents, they will take into account commission. And so bonuses and commission are included in that pay gap. And because they're so heavily weighted at the top and in the C-suite with men, so you probably have an even 50-50 split, like in most corporate agencies, of women and men, but women are just all in the lower pay quartile because they're all in the supporting roles, admin, and then letting, so they're just not the higher earners. Anyway, I digress, but it's an important.
I'll introduce you. I'll say
sorry.
Intro, and then what we'll do is we'll get into the nitty gritty of what's your name, where'd you come from. So, Ellie Rees stands at the forefront of transforming UK estate agency through an ethical estate agency, Brickworks in London, while simultaneously leading industry-wide campaigns for gender equality and inclusive practices. As co-founder and new business director of Brickworks since 2014, she has disrupted traditional estate agency models by combining her fine arts background with transparent business practices and social justice advocacy. Her leadership of the viral Dear Sirs campaign, which gathered nearly 4,500 signatures and influenced major law firms to eliminate sexist language, demonstrates her influence extends far beyond her North London-focused estate agency. That was a mouthful. Ellie, welcome to the podcast again.
Thank you so much. Sorry, I'd already started on a rant.
So let's take us back to the beginning then. So
yeah,
you've got the creative art background. How do you go from, and again, correct me if I'm wrong here, how do you go from winning is it prestigious Jerwood Prize, is that right?
Oh yeah, God, that was a long time ago. Thanks.
And exhibiting internationally, and were you a lecturer as well at Chelsea Art School?
Yeah, I was. Yeah, I was a higher education tutor.
A huge shift from lecturing at Chelsea Art School, working in opera, and then now you're an estate agent. And I think that's a really interesting
slippery slope.
Well, most people fall into estate agency sometimes, but what I find interesting is that when you've got obviously that in your background, and that's kind of, I suppose, not your identity as such, but that's you and what you do, and all of a sudden somebody from that background comes into a estate agency. It's very clear to see on your website and your branding that you've got a real kind of either you've got a really great creative agency, or you genuinely are creative. And I think you are genuinely are creative because of how you what do I want to say? The services you offer and what you do to get the properties on the market, if that makes sense as well. So anyway, enough from me. Talk to us about
That
it.
transition, I think, it's key and it's really interesting. It's interesting for all of us because as you say, the cliche is that people fall into a estate agency. Nobody goes, when I grow up, I want to be an estate agent. Far from
Unless you're
it.
in Simon Gates. He's the exception to the rule.
So, and the truth of the matter is that I met Rex, my husband and business partner, on a viewing. He showed me around a house.
Wow.
That is it. I fancied him. I didn't buy. I was looking for my mum. We didn't offer on the property, but I sent him a message. He was working at Winkworth at the time. And I just said, if you're not gay and you're single, do you want to go for a drink?
Nice.
He said, yes. His story goes that he went back to the office and said, I've just met the woman I'm going to marry.
Oh, wow.
My best friend who I was with at the time said, well, you're going to go out with the estate agent from Winkworth, very disparagingly. And 12 weeks later, I was pregnant.
Oh, wow.
Yes, correct. True story. And so life is basically how it happened. But also, Rex had been an agent, fallen into it for a long time and wasn't a stereotypical estate agent at all. He'd studied history and philosophy at university, but he was a good agent, but he really didn't like the culture of the agency. And he'd worked for a number of corporates, some independent agencies. He did a stint at the Modern House very early on for a very short space of time, but ultimately realised that he just wanted to do it his own way, and that was how he was going to be able to identify the things culturally about agency and the business of it that he didn't like, and eradicate those in his own company and sort of emphasize the things that he thought was really positive. And as I'm sure you'll concur, it's ostensibly a human relationships game, but it become increasingly transactional. And then because of my creative background, this is 11 years ago. So I was looking at photographs and saying, why have they not taken the knickers off the radiator in the Rightmove advert? Why has nobody made the bed? This is like such a poor standard. Why is this accepted in this industry that this is like the benchmark is so low? We could do better immediately, right? And even when I look at our photography now, 11 years on, I cringe because it looks really bad. But then it was like so much better than the majority of what was out there. So it was the sort of the visual eye that I brought, I think, at that time. But also when you go to art school, you are taught to sort of critically think, because you don't go to art school thinking I'm going to get a job at the end of this. Like fine art is about ethos, it's about philosophy, it's about an approach to life. And yet, irrespective of the fact that you're not really learning tangible skills for the job market, quote unquote, art graduates are one of the most highly recruitable graduate groups because they're so adaptable. Their skills are so transferable. So you're taught to think critically. You're taught to be extremely resourceful. If you think about putting on an exhibition, you have to raise funding for it. You have to logistically put it on. You have to get the human resources in place. You have to find a venue, etc. So you have to do the marketing and the campaigning and the advertising yourself. So you're sort of taught to be project managers. You're taught to production, and that is ostensibly what taking a property all the way through convincing somebody to work with you on evaluation. So the new business, getting a client on, all the way through to launching that property and then completing the sale, it's kind of a production.
I was going to ask, how do you think the skills and what you've learned is transferable? You've just kind of answered that, I guess, in a big way. And so, just taking it back to the beginning, you mentioned, photos and professional standards, and I do think you're absolutely spot on. Professional standards are still very low across the industry, which is why
they've got better.
They have. I think since COVID, there's a lot more people now using a professional photographer. And that's just someone that gets paid to take photos. It doesn't mean they're any good.
I know. Can I ask about that? What's an unprofessional photographer? Like, as if, like, people always say this, and it's like, what are you going to just get what they mean is the agent with an iPhone?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's not good enough.
Exactly that. Yeah. But also, Ian made a very good point the other week about staging and styling and professional photography, and that you could almost, and I guess you'll probably be in this camp as well, Ellie, given what you do. The thought process along the lines of you're better off to have a room that's staged and styled and presented well, a photo taken by a lesser experienced and maybe not as professional, quote unquote, photographer is going to look better than one. You could have David Bailey in the room, but if David Bailey's taking pictures of a messy bed and loo roll on the side
or an empty room, even worse, an empty room, like just a box with nothing in it, that's the worst.
And I'm really interested in to dive down because looked at obviously on your website, we've chatted for a little while now, and when I was looking at your website, it really drew to me that how big your sort of staging and styling side of the business is, in terms of it's not just about moving things around. You guys will go the whole way. Could you just unpack that a little bit for us and what that looks like?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things with the photography. It isn't even just about having a professional photographer with a proper camera, like a digital SLR. But like, I am as detailed as I want to know what lenses they're using. I insisted that one of our photographers buy a new lens at one point.
What?
Because I wasn't getting I wasn't getting the shots I wanted. And I think, that having that background is great in terms of like, I do really know what I want and what I need.
Mm-hmm. And was that detailed or was that wides in
that was actually wide. So there's a really fine balance between being too wide and the photographer crouching down in the corner with a sort of fisheye lens or a really wide angle lens, and there being a discrepancy between the reality and what the image looks like, because there's nothing worse than somebody turning up for a viewing and what looks like quite a big bedroom being absolutely tiny. However, you can also go the other way. Now, I think it's better if somebody turns up and says, oh, this looks better than it does in the photographs, but at the same time, really the ideal is that it's actually accurate.
Yes.
Details is a big thing for us. We started doing it at the beginning. Lots of people have cottoned on now, but we have pairs of portraits. But I think that's really important in terms of the atmosphere of property. And I look to editorial. So I did a stint after my beginning of my fine art career. I then did a stint in interiors publications and I did editorial work. And I think that that's really informed the way that we present property. So I'm hoping that our marketing basically looks like World of Interiors or El Deco or Architectural Digest. But that's also the photographers. So I'm really lucky in that my network of photographers, they're all old friends from art school. They're all at the top of their game. They are all working for those publications. Somebody will come and work for Brickworks and they will be flying in from doing Middle East Architectural Digest from Dubai or whatever. So we're really lucky in that regard. We also pay them well.
I'm going to say, do you sell that when you go and meet a prospective client, like as a value add? This isn't a agent with an iPhone. This is a guy or girl that's just flew in from Tokyo and just been shooting on behalf of whatever magazine. I do think there's real value add in that.
Yeah, 100%.
And the kind of houses that you would sell would really kind of buy into that. So talk me through the process of what that looks like then. So from coming to market in terms of sort of staging, styling, what would you say is your approach?
So I go to the property. Well, first of all, we qualify on the valuation request with photographs. So we start with a selection process. And if we can identify that we think somebody needs help. So a really important thing about Brickworks is that we don't want to be elitist.
Just want to unpack a little bit what you just said there. I'm really interested in what you just said. When you said about that photograph. So do you
Yeah.
mean you get clients to send you photographs of their place before you go first?
Yes, first. Would not book in a in-person visit without photography. Not our photography, obviously, but just, and we say, look, don't worry if it's really messy. We can see past that. But I will not physically go somewhere unless I've seen what the property looks like. Waste of my time. In the nicest way, waste of my time.
Yeah, we've done that. I'm doing that increasingly more. I can generally tell. Well, obviously, a completely different area to you, aren't we? Completely different type of area, but I can generally tell just from looking at the Google Street View image if it's going to be right for us, because a lot of them have like 2 or 3 acres and the characterful farmhouses and barn conversions and that sort of stuff. So I can generally tell. But increasingly, I ask for photographs, really to help with preparing the valuation. That's why I do it.
Yeah.
I mean, we should maybe do it on
Me too,
because it's so good.
But it's also about tempering expectations, I think.
Yeah.
So it's like, can we sell it? Because if we don't think we can sell it, we're not really doing them a favor either. Yeah. We've had people get really like uppity with us.
Of course, you will do, yeah. How do you ask it? How does it get asked?
Please tell us as much about the property as possible. Number of bedrooms, is it leasehold or share of freehold? Yeah. When did you buy it? Have you done any renovations? Yeah. How long have you lived there? And to help aid our research, if it would be possible, could you send us a couple of snaps? So it's very like, and also.
Yeah. Yes.
Tag it on. We don't want it to, because.
How do they send them to
you? I try to avoid WhatsApp because otherwise I'm constantly WhatsApped by clients. So no, all email via our valuations, online valuations portal on the website. So that will be filtered by our office manager, probably even before it gets to me. And she'll say, this one looks a bit dodgy. What's really important is that we're not elitist. So this is not a case of wearing a badge of honor. We reject 70% of what comes through the door. We don't want to be like that. What we want to be like is, if we don't think we can maximize value for you, if we don't think we can present your property in the best light, which will ensure a fast sale to the right buyer at a good price, we will either not work with you because we're not the right fit, or we can offer you loads of services to get you from not really being ready to market to being ready for market. And sometimes, once it took us a year to get a really big house. So a woman's husband had died. It was under really sad circumstances. He was an artist, and she had lots of stuff in her house, and it was a big emotional move. And it took a really long. It was an amazing house, but there was just way too much stuff in it. It was so cluttered. And so, sometimes part of the process I say to people is, you've got to move anyway, so you need to do these things anyway. I'm not making you declutter because I'm being punishing. You are going to be eventually moving, and that's going to come round sooner than you imagine. So you might as well do it now. Get your kind of house in order, literally, metaphorically, get your house in order emotionally. And of course, and this is the main selling point for the majority of people, we know, because there is so much data, particularly from the States and other places where staging and styling is absolutely de rigueur, Australia, Ireland, Southern Ireland, that you are looking at between 5 and 8% in general uplift on final sale price for a staged or styled property. And we've gone up to like 15% more than like local agent valuations on places that have been sort of lightly renovated and then
you're going to ask about the
styled.
Ian, we're going to ask about the sources for those bits about the 5 to 8%. It looked like you were going to ask that. That's
exactly what I was going to ask.
What do you mean?
Where's the 5 to 8% come from? Is there like
a source for that? Yeah.
Is that like a stat, or because that's really powerful, boy. That's an amazing stat.
Multiple. They're all from. The issue is they're all from America, because culturally that is
Really?
it's still not
Massive.
really understood here. There's a woman called Elaine Penhall who runs a company called Lemon and Lime Interiors, and she's really amazing as a sort of mentor for the industry of staging in terms of the logistics of it and the nuts and bolts of it and the business of it. And I would be interested to know if she's got any hard and fast facts. But in when we look at our own data, which obviously isn't massive, we are always selling those properties. You know, it's like sell high, sell fast. It's that, isn't it? And it's actually often that sell of those additional services is much easier to overseas clients. Often that's our American clients, for example, of whom there are quite a lot in London, like proportionately speaking. That will be a quick, you don't even need to explain what it is. Sorry, for example, on our new website, we're defining it. You've got to define it. You've got to say, this is what it is.
We've had a few clients w'ho've moved back to the UK from the States, so they're British originally, and they get it. They just get it. We've had one, and there's loads of examples actually, but one recently where they've been in Silicon Valley for 30 years, moved back here, bought a lovely old Victorian place, and were blown away when I went to present to them compared to the other agents. They're more than happy to pay the fee. You know, really, really got it, and it is becoming more prevalent, isn't it? It's becoming more well known. But just to speaking to people who are listening, if you can be the first in your area, like we were with offering home styling as part of what you do, it massively sets you apart. But I would suggest to other agents to do it now before anyone else does it, because it's coming. And if you can be the first, it really differentiates you.
Professional standards in the US are so much higher, and in Australia as well. And it's no wonder why, you know, they're commanding 5% fees over there, you know, 8% fees, when the professional standards are so much higher. And it's a much more, you know, it's even more competitive over there, isn't it? Arguably in a lot of spaces.
Service industries in the States are better in general, though, right? And I mean, if you look at like the qualifications that agents need, it's just it's just not like the Wild West like it is here. There's so many sort of changes that need to be made for us to kind of meet them on a level in terms of standards across the board. But I think what's interesting to us is there's some staging that is done, but the majority of what people need help with is actually just a light touch. It's kind of getting them from like 80% to 95%, not the full Monty. You'll always have a landlord who's selling an ex-rental that's in a really dire state, and they just give you the keys, they pay you a really good fee, you go in, you do the whole kit and caboodle. That I find exciting because it's so transformative. But actually the majority of people just need to know, I can't see the wood for the trees. You know, I've got kids at school, work's really busy, I'm going on holiday, I need to declutter, it's really overwhelming. I probably should have like changed the tiles and regrouted in the bathroom ages ago, but I didn't. It's that. So even on evaluation, I will come up with a snagging list for people. I almost always take a video of a snagging list, and then over the years, so we used to just give that advice away immediately and in person, until we realized that people were taking our advice to the letter, going away, doing it themselves, and then working with another agent who was undercutting us. And I had seen online agents that we're in competition with in certain patches of London, whereby I was like, I told them to do that. I told them to paint that colour. I told them to get rid of that chair and move that sofa there.
Yeah.
And it was realising that actually that visual eye that I have and that creative industry background that I have is really valuable, but that it has to be monetised. Like it's intangible. So people will say, why can't you just tell me what to, like, why wouldn't you just give me that free advice? And it's because the overwhelming majority of estate agents, 99% of estate agents going in, would not see what I see. So that's my superpower. It's our differential. So now what I do and maybe this is a bit mischievous, but it makes sense and it works, is I'll take a video and they'll say, can we have the snagging list video? Which will be like, I don't know, it could be anything, but it might be like 5 minutes long because it will be bits and pieces, small bits and pieces in every bedroom. And I say, yes, once you've signed a contract.
Do they pay up front?
So
something. Do they pay something up front?
Yeah, they would. So what we started to do recently is keep a studio inventory of like light stock. So like the soft bits, so things like cushions and throws and candlesticks, and we've got an amazing array of fake plants, like really good quality, expensive fake plants. We did real plants for a while at the beginning, and that was a disaster. I mean, how moronic is that? Just like there's no one to water them. I really hate that kind of, because it can go too far. So it has to look, my ideal is that you would go on the website and you wouldn't be able to tell what is someone's real home that's being lived in and what is a staged and styled property.
Yeah. Okay, that's good.
And as a result, and then this leads into other things, is we don't procure all our stock new. Loads of it's vintage, loads of it's secondhand. It's charity shops, it's antiques markets, it's like vintage stores, it's eBay. It has to be sustainable, right? Because you can't have this kind of fast buying, but also I don't want it aesthetically to look. That's the problem with the majority of stages. Even the good ones, they all look shiny and new. And, you know, the throws are sort of ruffled in a really unnatural, silly way, you know, and it's not eclectic enough. It all matches too much. And the artwork isn't like real artwork. And I don't know. So there is a real fine art to it, no pun intended, in that to make a space staged that doesn't look like it's staged, but also a lived in space that looks at its best. I mean, so there are only certain stylists we work with, and they tend to be freelance and have their own independent company. So that is a collaboration as well in that regard. And then we have a stock of stuff that they can borrow, but they'll bring their own stuff in as well. And we do get paid up front. Initially we didn't. Initially we did a higher fee and it came from the completion funds, but it doesn't work for cash flow.
So what do you charge?
Oh gosh, it is all property dependent, so it has to be spec'd up.
Right.
But it would probably start at about 4,000 plus VAT for something small, and like a house would be probably like 10 grand. Depends what's required. And sometimes people come to us and they'll say, I've got beds, but I need a dining table, or I don't have a sofa, or I've got everything, but I need but I've got no artwork on the walls, and I've got no objects on the shelves, and I've got no books. And we've got like, you know, it's a pain, isn't it, to suddenly find, 40 books for a shelf.
Obviously collaborate with different designers, etc. So you kind of bring them in and what kind of take a cut, or do you just bring them in, they pay them? Yeah, cool, that makes sense. I find this really interesting, by the way, because it's such a different and refreshing approach. I mean, we've got obviously our approach that kind of we use, and there's a lot of synergies between what the three of us do and what you do. And I think, we're all kind of, for want of a better phrase, singing from the same hymn sheet, because having the right marketing and having it looking correct and looking its best will ultimately yield results. So just stepping away from that a second, how are you finding the market? Obviously you're North London, aren't you? What are you seeing in the market at the moment in North London?
So we're the whole of London. Our office is in North London, but we sell all over London, from sort of Peckham and East Dulwich. We get a lot in the east, so we're quite big in Hackney, Stoke Newington, Dalston, Clapton. We tend not to segue into the west. The west is a bit of its own country, sort of different demographic.
Okay.
We are finding, so this is my little theory at the moment. I don't know how you're different because of where you are. We are selling everything as long as it's got an outside space. If it doesn't have a garden, it's just like doomed. It could be the most beautiful, exquisite interiors, but if there's no terrace, or there's no garden, forget it. And we think that is because of the weather, because we are so British that this sort of stark contrast between what we're used to and how unprecedentedly warm it's been. If you're on a viewing, for example, and you're in a flat and there's no garden, but you've just come from a barbecue and then you're on your way to go down to Brighton for the weekend, you're so acutely aware of the fact that there is no outside space. So we have found that the property that's not even our best property, that's had gardens, like a one bed garden flat, for example, just sell immediately. And look, we don't take on anything that isn't really lovely, but I mean, in the spectrum of lovely to like knocking it out of the park, stunning, we've had some places at that end of the spectrum which haven't had outside space and they have just not sold. Can't even get viewings for them. People don't want to. So that seems to be at a real premium at the moment, that garden space. That's how we're finding the market.
I've never thought of that, with this weather we've had and how that would affect those types of properties.
Probably most of what you're selling has gardens, right? But because we're in a lot in zone 2, loads of apartments, kind of that urban duplex thing. And even our houses might have small gardens, like they might be good, but they might be small. So yeah, gardens.
Yeah, interesting.
So I'm interested in. So we've had a lot of estate agency chat, and I'm just looking at some of the notes that I'd written before you'd come on today. Could I just segue over a little bit into your sort of personal leadership and vision? Like you described yourself as writing a manifesto to disrupt a estate agency back in 2014. So a decade later, question I want to ask.
Not very pretentious or anything.
Hey, listen, you got to put it out there. You've got to be. If you're just vanilla, you'll fade into the background like everyone else, which is something that we're really passionate about here. What we do and how we do it for ourselves is, if you don't stand out and you just say yes to everything, you just become somebody else and just background noise. So what the question I was going to ask you is, a decade later, with interest rate volatility, regulatory changes, how has that manifesto evolved? And if you were going to rewrite it today, how would you? What would you rewrite if you were starting that today with Brickworks?
Well, I'm probably more cynical than I was, so you can't kind of go back with hindsight. I mean, look, we're bootstrapped. Still, we're really small, but we've always made a profit. And when you look at the fact that 10% of startups make it to 10 years.
Yeah.
I sort of always feel like I'm winning.
Yeah.
So it's not, maybe it's not like, I'm not very money orientated. So I would probably, and that's the fine artist in me, but I would probably say that that's a strength and a weakness. So probably if I went back internally, a manifesto, I don't think the forward facing manifesto would be any different, but I think internally it would be like, sort out the nuts and bolts. We made loads of mistakes, but who doesn't? I mean, we didn't have MBAs. We'd never run a business before. I was an artist and Rex was an estate agent, but we had, it was literally kitchen table. You're winging it, aren't you? Yeah.
We've been there as well, though, Ellie, just for full context. Like, I don't know how much you know about us three, but we've all come from the same background of, in 10, 15 years ago, between us, we were all convinced in our businesses at the time that everything was going estate agency was undergoing a technological revolution, which arguably it has, but equally the way that it was going was that it was going to be high volume, low fixed fee, online, and we were very much, basically, I was charging $999, no sale, no fee. Ian was doing something similar. Dave was charging the same, or £500 up front. Yeah, exactly. And again, my business was effectively started from a spare room at my mum's house 13 years ago, and we've made tons of mistakes. But that's what business is about, right? It's about learning along the way, and learning from, I suppose, the mistakes that you make and building on the experience that you have. To ultimately get to where you are. And we realised very quickly between us that, well, I certainly did maybe 6 or 7 years ago, where we were one of the market leaders in our area. We had big market share. We'd sold nearly 200 houses, but it was all £1,800 plus VAT, 2-bed terraces, and it's just, it works well for some agencies, and they like the volume, the churn, the bish bash bosh, but it just wasn't lighting my fire. And I just wanted to almost kind of come back to a point you just said a minute ago, is that for me, it's not about the money as such as well, because if it was just about money, then I would probably still be trying to scale a high volume, low fee business. But for
Yeah.
me, I get a kick out of having time to spend with clients. The quality of the marketing, putting together
Yeah.
a bespoke brochure. Going to a twilight shoot at 10 o'clock at night in the summer. With the photographer to get the marketing, and it's a much more pleasurable experience to be able to have an impact on not just the marketing, but an impact on the sellers' lives, and really be able to influence the result directly, be it by being able to spend more time with the client and on the marketing. And you'll know yourself, the sort of mid to upper end of the market, you meet some really interesting people along the way, and some of the conversations you have with people. I've sold houses for people that have run football clubs in the Premier League, ex sports professionals. I've sold houses for big tech company. I've met people that are, world record holder, Olympic athletes. They're just people you wouldn't meet generally day to day selling 2-bed terraces, and I get a real buzz out of that. And I don't look at just the money. Yes, we charge what we're worth, and I know we obviously preach here, 2% and getting the upper end of the market. But for me, I think and what I'm trying to articulate here, I guess in a way, is if you focus on what you're good at and you do it well, the numbers will take care of themselves.
Yeah, to an extent, definitely. And I think then the question is, can you really scale that? Because what you're talking about, I think, JK, is something that is about more of an intellectual pursuit and a kind of holistic human pursuit. It's like your values are important to you, your politics are important to you, who you work with, who you're meeting, who you're having conversations with. And actually, they might be an ex-Olympic athlete, but they might just be a really interesting woman who's had, I don't know, amazing life experience and is a professor of, I don't know, astrophysics at a university or whatever it might be. I mean, actually, it's just really about the human connections as well and helping people. And that might sound trite, but, we glibly talk about the 3Ds, don't we? Death, divorce, and debt in agency. But the truth of the matter is you are often meeting people at really difficult, emotional, pivotal moments of their lives. And somebody might have died, or a baby might be on its way, or a divorce is going on, or someone's moving for a job, or there's economic hardship, or a financial imperative to move, or, somebody's done really well and there's a really joyful thing. But the fact that agencies become so transactional, that's what you're talking about. You're talking about it not being transactional. You're talking about it being about the home. And the home, the notion of the home, that is a philosophical notion. Now, I'm often accused of being too intellectual and too political and too highbrow, as if, and I certainly don't think I am. And I certainly don't think that that's like pejorative, I think, or negative. I think that's a good thing, because you're talking about people and you're talking about the idea of the home, and that's what's key here, and that's your competitive edge. And if you can then sort of expand that into your brand and everybody who works with you and the core values of the business and the team that you recruit to kind of come on that journey. I don't know if you've seen this, and I don't know if you guys have for sale boards, but I did a sort of ban the boards campaign at one point, because I'm very, very anti estate agency boards. And lots of people think that's total madness. But it comes from kind of personal politics, and it comes from caring about the environment and sustainability, and it also comes from understanding the perception of estate agents by the general public. And so I think it's because you're looking at it from a different angle. You're just not looking at it like this, like round the corner. No one can see me because I'm on a podcast, but I'm doing a round the corner sign with my hands. Does that make sense? So I think for me, my background is academia. And so I couldn't do this job if it wasn't somehow intellectually stimulating or satisfying. And I don't know if it's then worth talking about the campaigning that I do, but that is why I'm so involved in women in the estate agency world and women in property, because we're really underrepresented and we are really important in the home buying and selling process. We're instrumental in the home buying and selling process. We are not represented. It's not reflective at the higher level in terms of ownership of agencies, C-suite representation, senior leadership. It's not representative. The decision makers in a estate agency are not women, they're white men. And I'm aware of the fact that I'm on a podcast with 3 white men.
What I do think is interesting, what I do think is interesting is...
But it's how we met, isn't it, online?
Absolutely.
James.
Yeah, exactly that. And
because we were sort of wading in on something.
Yeah, but I do think it needs to be talked about. I think, there is a lot of, it was Tom McGee that posted on LinkedIn a little while back. And the thing is, there is kind of like the old boys club in a estate agency that is, they've sort of got the stranglehold in a lot of ways. I don't know if that's the correct term, but of the main outlets.
I think it's definitely the correct term. Stranglehold, let's call it that. Yeah.
Let's go. But the thing is, it's not even, I don't even think it's necessarily a male, female, color, gender, whatever kind of thing. It's more about them protecting what they have. And, even for a new voice, like myself or, the other guys on here, even other people that I know. but I mean, that aside, even if you're talking about, if you took it away from gender, even the what I would call the new breed, if that makes sense, even they can't get on there. But I do feel like, you've got so much value and so much to say, and, such a great refreshing take on estate agency, given, your academic background, given your creative background, platforms like, I don't want to, well, actually, no, I will just call them out, but like Property Industry I think they are dying a bit of a death because they're just not interested.
God, I hope so.
It's just the same. It's the same old crap.
It is boring, isn't it? I think that's right. I think that actually, even if you took away the fact that a lot of what's happening is sort of politically incorrect, and I don't mean that in a kind of PC way, but like morally dubious and kind of not really in line with new progressive cultural norms. Even if you take that away from it, it's boring. Just on a really straightforward, I do not want to hear from the same people anymore. It's boring because it's the same angle and
it's the same old stuff every week.
Yeah, but I also, there has to be, you're basically talking about maintaining the status quo, and you're right, that hasn't really got anything to do with gender at all, but it has got to do with the patriarchy, I'm afraid. And I should have worn my on Wednesdays we smash the patriarchy t-shirt. Or actually I've got one that says, if you're not angry, you're not paying attention. That's my favorite one. But it's those patriarchal infrastructures of business, which is capitalist business, are about maintaining the status quo. Yeah. So there are some women in positions of leadership that they are just kowtowing to the existing established infrastructures. Doesn't matter that they're women.
No, exactly.
If that makes sense. It's the system. So there's that kind of fix the system, don't fix the individual. And that's the situation we're in at the moment. So you'll often tackle a corporate and say, you've got issues with diversity and inclusion and gender in your makeup, and they'll say, oh, but this woman leads this office, and some of the best bosses I've ever had have been female, and like it's completely missing the point, because it's about the culture, it's about the systems, it's about what's intrinsically embedded. It's not about, are you a woman or man? It's just such a literal, superficial understanding of what the problems are. And then you'll get somebody like Chris Watkin, and I am going to name names, but you get somebody like Chris Watkin who will make sure he has a kind of quota of women that he talks to, otherwise he'll come under fire. But what he's talking to them about is not market trends. He's not talking to them about fees or valuations. He's not talking to them about the infrastructure of their business. He's not talking to them about the nuts and bolts and the mechanics of a estate agency. He's talking to them about stereotypical things to do with women based on really old-fashioned notions and assumptions. So he'll just be saying, how hard is it to be a wife and a mother and an estate agent? Well, that's a completely patronizing, condescending, irrelevant, boring question. Why aren't you asking me the questions that you've just asked me, which is, how are you finding the market at the moment? How do you make sure you differentiate your marketing and your photography? Because I'm running an estate agency. The most interesting thing about me, I hope, is not that I am female.
No, not at all. And that's the thing. There's plenty of people. If I wanted to just interview we wanted to get somebody on the podcast that was, a female business owner. I mean, there's loads, but I think what stood out from me was your agency. It kind of aligns with, what we kind of preach at The Complete Agent in terms of, staging, styling, best practice, ethical, all of those things really align with kind of
values.
With kind of what we preach. And while we're on the subject of that, I really wanted to talk to you because I was really interested.
Of Chris Watkin.
In the Dear Sirs campaign.
Yes.
Because I've got friends that are solicitors. I've made friends with solicitors, and I often used to ask. Hayley, who was on the podcast last week, she's been threatening to come on the podcast for about a year, and I finally nailed her down to come. And it was great. We've had some really good feedback from it. The thing that I asked her.
I heard her memorandum of sale rant.
Which is absolutely valid. But I remember asking her and another friend of mine, Julia, I remember saying to them, I said, why, when you're writing to each other, why do you write Dear Sirs to each other? It's backwards. It just doesn't make sense to me. And it is very, very kind of old school. And that's why I just wanted to drill down really quickly into this Dear Sirs campaign. You had nearly 4,500 signatures. There was major law firms like Freshfields that changed their practices. Beyond language.
That wasn't because of me. That wasn't because of me. But it's there have been a few sort of quite pioneering female lawyers who have sort of started this journey. But it still isn't. We're still having to talk about it. I mean, it's still quite a big problem that Dear Sirs is used on a habitual basis. The truth of them.
Where did it come from, though? What made you wake up one day and say, "Do you know what? I've had enough of this"?
I think because I came into the industry from a different sector, completely different. I'd never come across it before. So even the first time I received a Dear Sirs email, I was like, I had to ask people in the office, what's this? I didn't get it. Because why would you come across it unless you're an agent or a solicitor or somebody who interacts with lawyers on a regular basis? Because Dear Sirs, initially, hundreds of years ago, was the salutation for a company that you didn't know the name of. So it's just a shorthand for a collective. Yeah. And of course, it was during a time where women didn't even have the vote, let alone could be lawyers or were working at that kind of level. And it's just fossilized. It's just not changed. It just stuck. And literally, as the rest of society has progressed, that language has just stuck. And sometimes, so linguists call that language fossilization. So
it seems odd.
So odd.
Just for me, it doesn't compute. I mean, I'm 39, and if I email someone, I normally email them, "Hi." So if I was emailing you, I'd say,
"Hi, Ellie."
"Hi, Ellie,"
I know.
And then whatever I want to say, and that's it.
So the argument is,
I never got, I would never.
the argument is it's high volume, it's automated, you have to have templates, things like that. So what we're trying to ensure is that those templates, the IT systems in the first place don't have Dear Says as an option, as an automated option. It's very much a legal thing. I mean, the solicitors have been wearing this as a kind of badge of honor. Again, I think it's patriarchal. And I think what's interesting about Sir is, again, it doesn't just speak to gender, does it? It also speaks to authority. Like, you call your teacher Sir if you're at Eton, it's class. It's absolutely a sort of superiority thing. It's a position of authority. So it's sort of problematic in lots of ways. And at the moment, what we're really trying to do is get the Law Society and other kind of governing bodies and legal institutions to write into their guidance that Dear Says should ostensibly be avoided at all costs because it's not inclusive language. And I think we'll get there. I mean, it really lit a touch paper. I was on Radio 4 Women's Hour, and I've written a couple of articles in the Times, and it seems to have really caught people's imagination. And I think the reason for that is it makes lots of people really, really angry. Because if you're a woman and you're running your own business, and anyway, things are kind of more challenging. There is more adversity. There just is, especially if you're in a massive minority. So in agency, for example, there's only 13% of women founders of estate agents. And I would imagine if you're black or brown or from the global majority, that's like even lower. It's probably a tiny percentage. So I know there's some white privilege in that stat as well. But what's interesting is that if you receive that, Dear Sirs, it really is a sort of like, oh, for fuck's sake. Are you joking? You could at least just, and by the way,
I think high is okay.
Well, solicitors would say it's not so solicitors would say it's not formal enough. So that's okay. You could have to whom it may concern, for example, which again, you might argue is really old fashioned and a bit stuffy, and it is, but it's just not harmful. So my argument is that Dear Sirs is just reinforcing that paradigm, which we talked about earlier, not necessarily about gender. It's about the status quo. It's about the patriarchy. It's like, who's in charge? Who's at the top of the tree? Dear Sirs just reinforces that. So to whom it may concern, I wouldn't use, but it does the job. But you could just have Dear Colleagues, Dear Everyone. If you're writing to a particular team, I don't know, Dear IT Department. It's pretty impersonal. But if you can't be bothered to find out the name of the person, also, it shouldn't necessarily be something that's ever repeated, because if I was writing to you and you're like james@thecompleteagent.com or whatever it might be, I know you're James because it's in your email address.
Yeah.
So I think it's lazy. Okay. I think it's sort of lazy. And I also think it's a kind of bigger picture thing, which is you're trying to, the systems and the institutions are really old, and you're just trying to sort of like turn around a massive behemoth of a ship. We'll get there.
Yeah.
We'll get there. Because it's a bit David and Goliath, but most people in the real world think it's absurd.
So let's segue into, to wrap up for today then, industry future. So looking ahead to 2025, 2030, I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit. If you could implement three fundamental changes across the entire UK property industry, not just agencies, but like, what would they be, and how would you sort of measure movements that are creating lasting change?
3 things.
Anything that comes to your mind off the top of your head?
Specifics. I'd make gazumping illegal.
Yeah.
And then I would have other sort of legalities around the mechanisms.
Yeah. So like reservation.
Because I think that's.
Do you think reservation agreements?
Exactly. Deposits.
Yeah.
Deposits. Is that 2 or is that 1?
I guess that's kind of 1, isn't it? Because that's kind of what you're doing. And we've actually got Brian Mansell from Gazelle, who they do reservation agreements, coming on in a couple of weeks, because we had a bit of a debate on
I was looking at them the other day.
Yeah, on the previous podcast, like, Hayley wasn't keen on them as a conveyancer, but ultimately, so Brian got in touch with me directly and said, he'd like to come on and defend reservation agreements. I'm like, yeah, absolutely, let's do it. So he's coming on in a couple of weeks. But I think that I still feel like it's got to be ironed out, and I'd be interested to see, based on the conversation, what happens on that pod. So I do think that kind of leads into one. Any other two that you've got?
I feel really strongly about that, by the way, because I think that has an impact on the culture. Yes. I don't think it's like in isolation. I think it's why certain behaviours also happen. So that would be one. The other one would be, I would really like to see Dear Sirs be kind of formally eradicated, so that was the guidance.
Yeah.
From, the SRA and Silex and the Law Society, that it was our understanding as professionals within the industry that was not only frowned upon, but might be in breach of compliance.
Yeah, fair.
And that would extend to other gender biased language. So, for example, tenancy agreements are all male default pronouns.
Yeah.
It's all he, him, his. Quite like to see that be they, them.
Are you just sales?
No.
Just sales.
Just sales.
Cool. Okay. Well,
and then what would the third thing be? The third thing would be that we weren't also reliant on Rightmove.
Yeah. But you know what? It's interesting. And again, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole too much. I appreciate we're an hour and 7 minutes now. So if you're still with us, thanks for staying with us. And I again, I don't want to go too deep on this, but the only people that have a problem with Rightmove are the estate agents. Would that be fair to say?
I don't actually have a problem with them.
Neither do I.
I just think
quite good value. I mean, I'm sure they'll be on the phone as they
so do I
every year to put the price up. But the reality is,
a
great invention would be what about a great invention where everyone could just go to one place and find all the properties that are marketed for sale? Well, that's Rightmove, and they got in there early, and they've got they've got the market. People go to Rightmove.
Well, I wish it was a better product though. So for what you pay, I just think it was better. I don't think the interface is very good. I don't think the design is very good. I don't think it's particularly innovative. I don't, the search function isn't sophisticated enough. There are so many things, they don't need to make it better because they are so profitable. And I just think that's complacency, and I just think that's a bit of a shame. But it's not. I don't have a problem with it per se. I just wish it was a much, much, much better product and much richer product.
I think there's a couple of things that you could unpack on that. I think that the biggest problem people have is, and I am in that camp, by the way, in that I feel like there's so much more that could go on in terms of innovation, in terms of search. You can't search by garden size. You can't search by plot size.
No,
I guess is almost the same thing.
Is it a Muse house?
Yeah, I mean, does it have an annex? Yes, you can search in the keyword section.
Was it built in the 60s?
That's it. I want a Victorian home, want a Georgian home, want an Edwardian home. I want a barn conversion. Yes, there is barn conversion option, but it doesn't. It's not going to filter by barn conversion. It will just come up in the search results that it is a barn conversion. And I think the other camp, and a lot of it is borne by, I think, agents that are, and we talked about it kind of a lot earlier on, maybe it was off air, about agents undercutting on fees. Agents are almost, for want of a better phrase, cutting their own throats by, undercutting each other by and 0.75, 0.5, driving their own, rather than driving their professional standards and their fees up, they're just doing the easy option and just cutting the fees. And obviously with inflation and Rightmove, aggregate inflation's at 33% from Jan 2020 till now. Everything's more expensive. Electricity, business is more expensive. Rightmove,
it's real, isn't it?
Up, and people feel it. And if their fees are going down, the number of transactions they're doing are going down, and their fees are going up. Well, my argument is, be better, raise your standards, raise your fees, and be more profitable. Because we're talking about the best part of $2,500-3,000 a month for Rightmove.
I know.
But I think what a lot of people's gripe is on that, just really quickly, is a lot of corporates are paying, hundreds of pounds per office for Rightmove, and I think that is wrong. Having, one agent in the
Agree.
town, just because they've got 50 offices, being charged £300 a month for the same subscription, and then the independent agent being charged £3,000 a month. That I do think is an issue.
It is, but equally, you could say the same for we have a minimum fee because we can't make it work without a minimum fee, and that means we're probably charging a much higher percentage to somebody with a £450,000 flat than somebody with a £2 million house.
Yeah, exactly. And
I can charge 1% at 2 million because it's 20 grand, So I also do understand that, but I also think if you're going to, because the corporates in a estate agency, they're so visible and they so set the tone, I think that just sort of cements that. And I think that's a bit of a shame. And I think that, again, that cements the culture. And then that feels like Rightmove are really behind them. They're really supportive of them. And then it means they're not so supportive of the smaller independent agencies, which is their bread and butter. And I think that it's not a nuanced or particularly intelligent approach. But again, why would they change anything when it's so financially successful?
Yeah. And they've got their own game. Everyone's playing a different game. They're playing the stack 'em high, sell 'em cheap game. We're playing a completely different game. The premium service, the staging before, the quality of the marketing. And it's about the.
And it can't last forever. Like Rightmove will be knocked off their perch. They will. I don't know when, and I don't know how, and I don't know who by. But of course they will. Of course they will, because there's always somebody more clever with something more exciting and more interesting that is kind of cool and works and ignites people's imagination. Like, we have to have, like with everything, it's like it was Tinder and then it was Bumble. I mean, of course it will happen.
The only thing I would say though is I do feel like Universal. I do feel like Rightmove is deep rooted in the culture in the UK of where people go to look for property online. I do think, whilst you've got your Tinder, your Bumble, this, that, and the other, I don't feel there was deep rooted in British culture maybe as say Rightmove is, and I think that's the power that they've got. And I can't, because there's Zoopla come along, booming, had millions and millions of pounds behind it, threatened to disrupt it.
But booming was not a good idea. And also, what was booming, no one knew, no one could understand, and even the people at booming, I'm sorry, like, maybe this is really harsh, but even the people at booming couldn't articulate what it was. I remember I was on a podcast with somebody from Boomin at the same time, and we were talking off air before we went on, and the person who was representing Boomin, I didn't understand what they were saying. And that wasn't like I didn't literally understand what they were saying, but I couldn't get the sell. Like, conceptually, I couldn't get the sell, and I don't consider, I'm not stupid. I didn't get it. So, unless you can do your lift pitch in 10 seconds, like you did mine from AI at the beginning, but I know what mine is. You know what yours is. By the way, I'd also like to say your background and just the way that you present yourself, like sartorially, the clothes you're wearing, immediately differentiates you from like a normal estate agent. And that's what we're talking about. And Boomin didn't do that. It was like, what does the name mean? Couldn't remember it. I didn't get what they were talking about. So I think, Zoopla's basically is just the same. It's the same. It's the same as Rightmove. So what I'm talking about is, and I don't know what this is, and if I had an idea, I would do it. But somebody will or you are able to. There'll be a portal whereby owners can put their own houses online, and that I think might change things. So I think once there's a sort of Airbnb,
I think they can kind of do that though already.
But you can't be on Rightmove. But you can't be on Rightmove. No, but there's still a middleman agent. I mean, literally going straight to the portals, like straight online without being branded by anybody else. So it's sort of Airbnb version of that. Because
the problem is though, fundamentally with that, is that they don't have the data and they don't have the trust. Rightmove has the trust of the public. A new site that comes along, I think the bottom end of the market, you have a go landlords. I think they kind of transactional and the bottom end of the market will may buy into that, but the problem is they haven't got the audience. They're going to have to spend so much money on getting the audience. I can't see that work. Where I think, and again it's almost the same challenge, where I think the disruptor comes in is the person that does it across a level plan. Because the thing is, the biggest issue they've got is the corporates, and Rightmove have got the corporates locked in. And whether you like the corporates or not, they've got the majority of the data, and the data is what brings people to Rightmove. It's a bit of a vicious circle. And if all of the independents left Rightmove and set up a new portal or were part of a new portal, I personally don't think it would be enough. I think you've got to get everyone over, because people are going to Rightmove to see the houses. And I think the stat is 90% of people that look at Rightmove aren't even looking to move anyway. There's only like 10% of people at a time that are serious movers. But I think that the biggest problem is getting the data on there. But where I do think somebody would win is, as you quite rightly said a minute ago, is if they just came, if Boomin came along and just said, we're a property portal, better. And, you can search by the garden, you can use the technology available now. And, we use Spectre property reports for a lot of our things in our business, and they're great for looking at title plans and plots and neighbouring titles up front. And I think the technology is there. It's digitized on Land Registry. If you could get somebody to plug into that API and utilize that, and it's, property search or property portals done better, I think if you can articulate that instantly. And how is it better? Well, the search function's better. We're not charging agents £4,000 a month to be on there. We're committed to being X amount per month, and it's a level playing field. Get your property data, properties on there. It's still not easy. It sounds easy, but the reality is, Zoopla have tried and failed. But I do feel like, and I'm not going to give the game away on the podcast in case someone listens to it, but I do think there is a better way. I don't think that they have truly figured it out just yet, because I do feel like sometimes with these companies, because again, it's a bit of a...
What about a quality control way? Because I always thought part of the problem for me with Rightmove is you just have to trawl through so much CRAP. And I always thought actually maybe you could have a quality control equivalent. And in some ways, the closest to this, although they're still massively reliant on the portals, Rightmove and Zoopla, Rightmove obviously especially, probably the closest to this is the Modern House. And that there'll be some people who will say, I only want to buy a Modern House property. I only want to buy a Modern House type house, right? Valid. What they've done, what they've done for agency, I mean, I have other issues with them culturally and otherwise, but what they have done for agency in that regard is phenomenal. And they probably still can't, they probably still quite don't have the reach for that to actually really be true, that you can only go on their website. They're still probably heavily reliant on leads from Rightmove, but they're probably the closest to it. And I suppose if there was a new wave of agencies, which was Modern House, Inigo, you guys, Brickworks, Acoot, The Story of Home, Bonington Square, whoever it is, Nested maybe, I don't know, Mr. and Mrs. Clark, whatever, that were, so people were kind of like the John Lewis of like, I know it's going to be good.
Premium
property portal. But when I say premium, I don't mean Daniel Daggers. Like I don't mean just sort of super prime. I mean, I there's a criteria in a certain
way. Could be prime and super prime.
Oh yeah. Sorry, I'm not excluding super prime, but I'm just saying.
But I don't mean just super prime.
No, and I also don't mean. I think when we think of prime and super prime, we think Selling Sunset, we think Bling, we think Central London, we think Cheshire, but the wag bit. I don't mean that. I mean good quality. So the criteria is not kind of narrow, superficially speaking. that I think would work, because I think you are then sort of, for want of a better term, separating the wheat from the chaff in the first instance. And then people are looking, you're curating it. And that's an overused term, but you are curating it. So let's do that, James. Make our millions that way.
Yeah, let's do it. Done. Right. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me. I've had so much fun.
Me too. And it's really refreshing to see, you know, again, we're kind of on each other's radar on LinkedIn, and I really love what you guys are doing at Brickworks. And yeah, it's great.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Likewise.
much for coming on.
Good luck with the new website.
Thank you. Well, thanks to everyone for listening, and we'll see you next week.